The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet streets of Maplewood. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the oak trees lining the neighborhood. It was an ordinary evening in a town where nothing much ever happened, except tonight something unusual was about to unfold. Emily Carter stepped out of her small sedan and onto the driveway of the Miller family home. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder and glanced at the house. Its warm yellow lights glowed invitingly through the windows, making it seem cozy and welcoming. Emily had babysat for Jacob and Laura Miller several times before, and she always enjoyed spending time with their bubbly toddler, Ethan. He was full of energy, curiosity, and endless questions that kept her entertained throughout the evening. Jacob opened the door just as Emily reached the porch. "Hey, Emily," he greeted her with a polite smile. "Thanks again for coming over on such short notice." "No problem," Emily replied, returning his smile. "You know I love hanging out with Ethan. Besides, it's not like I had anything better to do tonight." Laura appeared behind Jacob, holding Ethan by the hand. The little boy grinned up at Emily, his cheeks dimpling as he waved enthusiastically. "Emmy!" he exclaimed, running forward to hug her legs. Emily bent down to ruffle his hair. "Hey, there, buddy. Ready for some fun?" While Laura helped Ethan put on his favorite dinosaur pajamas, Jacob gave Emily a quick rundown of the evening. "Dinner's already been served, so you'll just need to clean up after him if he makes a mess. Bedtime is at 8:30 sharp. He gets cranky if he stays up too late. Oh, and here's my number in case you need anything." He handed her a slip of paper with both his and Laura's phone numbers written neatly in blue ink. "Got it," Emily said confidently. "Don't worry, I've got this under control." With one last round of hugs and kisses for Ethan, Jacob and Laura left the house, hurrying off to their work event. As soon as they were gone, Emily turned to Ethan with a playful grin. "All right, champ, what should we do first? Toys, books, or maybe a dance party?" Ethan giggled and pointed toward the living room. "Toys!" They spent the next hour building towers with blocks, racing toy cars across the carpet, and pretending to be astronauts exploring distant planets. Emily loved how imaginative Ethan was. Every ordinary object became part of an epic adventure when he was around. When the clock struck 7:30, she decided it was time to wind things down. "How about we read a story now?" she suggested, picking up one of Ethan's favorite books from the shelf, a colorful picture book about a mischievous monkey. "Yes," Ethan cheered, climbing onto the couch beside her. His eyes sparkled with excitement as Emily began reading aloud, using silly voices for each character. By the end of the story, his eyelids were drooping and he yawned loudly. "Time for bed, kiddo," Emily said softly, lifting him into her arms. She carried him upstairs to his bedroom, tucked him into bed, and kissed his forehead. "Sweet dreams, Ethan." As Ethan drifted off to sleep, Emily tiptoed out of the room, closing the door gently behind her. Downstairs, she tidied up the living room, putting away toys and straightening cushions. Once everything was back in its place, she settled onto the couch with her phone, sending a quick text to Laura. "Everything's fine here. Ethan's asleep." A few minutes later, Laura replied, "Thank you so much, Emily. We'll be home by midnight." Satisfied that all was well, Emily leaned back against the cushions and let out a contented sigh. The house was peaceful, filled only with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards settling. Outside, crickets chirped rhythmically, adding to the serene atmosphere. But then, something changed. At first it was subtle, a faint sound that didn't quite belong. Emily paused mid-scroll on her phone, straining to listen. There it was again, a whisper barely audible coming from somewhere outside the house. Frowning, she stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain slightly to peer into the darkness. The backyard was empty, bathed in the pale glow of the security light mounted above the garage. Shadows stretched across the grass, but nothing moved. Still, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was out there watching her. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. "It's probably just the wind," she muttered to herself, letting the curtain fall back into place. Returning to the couch, she tried to focus on her phone again, but the unease lingered. Around 9 o'clock, Emily checked on Ethan once more. He was still fast asleep, his chest rising and falling steadily beneath the covers. Reassured, she headed back downstairs. To distract herself, she flipped through channels on the TV, eventually settling on a rerun of a comedy show. The laughter of the actors echoed through the room, helping to ease her nerves. By 10 o'clock, the house was completely silent except for the muffled sounds coming from the television. Emily glanced at the clock, noting how slowly the minutes seemed to pass. She considered calling Laura just to check in, but decided against it. They were likely busy with their event, and she didn't want to bother them unnecessarily. Then, at 11:30, the whispers returned. This time, they were louder, clearer. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Slowly, she rose from the couch and crept toward the window again. Pulling back the curtain, she scanned the yard, her breath catching in her throat. There, standing near the edge of the woods, was a figure. It was tall and thin, almost unnaturally so, and its silhouette blended seamlessly with the shadows. For a moment, Emily thought she might be imagining things, but then the figure tilted its head slightly, as if aware of her presence. Her stomach churned with fear. Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and dialed Laura's number. It rang twice. Before going to voicemail, cursing under her breath, she sent a frantic text instead. "Something's wrong. There's someone outside." The figure remained motionless, staring directly at the house. Emily backed away from the window, her mind racing. Should she call the police? What if it was just a prank, or worse, what if it wasn't? Suddenly the power went out. The room plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of her phone screen. Emily fumbled with the device, her hands trembling as she tried to turn on the flashlight app. Just as the beam illuminated the space around her, she heard a loud thud from upstairs. Ethan. Without hesitation, she bolted toward the staircase, taking the steps 2 at a time. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she reached his bedroom door and pushed it open. The room was empty. Panic surged through her veins. "Ethan," she called out, her voice cracking. "Where are you?" No response. Frantically, she searched the rest of the house, throwing open doors and calling his name. But Ethan was nowhere to be found. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the horrifying truth. He was gone. Desperate, she grabbed her phone and dialed Jacob's number. Her fingers slipped on the screen, but she managed to press the call button. The line connected and Jacob's voice came through, groggy with sleep. "Emily?" he asked. "What's wrong?" "Something's wrong." "Ethan's gone," she stammered, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I don't know where he is. I can't find him anywhere." Before Jacob could respond, the line went dead. Emily stared at her phone in disbelief, realizing the battery had died. She sank to the floor, overwhelmed by fear and guilt. How could this have happened? And what was going to happen next? Outside, the shadowy figure still stood in the distance, watching silently as chaos unfolded within the house. Jacob's heart sank as he heard Emily's panicked voice on the other end of the line. Her words were barely coherent, but one phrase cut through the confusion like a knife. "Ethan's gone." His stomach tightened, and his mind raced with questions. What did she mean? How could Ethan just disappear? "Emily, slow down," Jacob shouted into the phone, sitting upright in bed. "What do you mean he's gone?" But before Emily could answer, the call disconnected. Jacob stared at his phone screen, dread creeping over him. He immediately dialed Laura, who was asleep beside him. She woke with a start, groggy and disoriented. "What is it?" Laura mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "It's Ethan," Jacob said urgently, his voice trembling. "Something's wrong." Emily called. She said Ethan's missing. Laura's face went pale. "What? Missing? That can't be." Without wasting another second, they threw on their clothes and rushed out of the hotel where they had been staying for their work event. The drive home felt endless, every red light and slow-moving car stretching the minutes into hours. Laura clutched her phone tightly, trying to call Emily back, but the line wouldn't connect. Each unanswered ring made her anxiety grow worse. When they finally pulled into their driveway, the house was eerily quiet. The front door stood wide open, swaying slightly in the breeze. Jacob jumped out of the car and ran inside, calling Ethan's name. Laura followed close behind, tears streaming down her face. "Emily!" Jacob shouted, his voice echoing through the empty halls. "Where are you?" They searched the entire house, room by room, but there was no sign of either Emily or Ethan. Toys lay scattered on the living room floor, and Ethan's favorite blanket was bunched up on the couch. Everything looked normal, except for the fact that their son wasn't there. Laura collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. "This can't be happening. Where is he? Where's my baby?" Jacob tried to stay calm, though his hands shook as he dialed 911. Within minutes, police officers arrived, their flashlights cutting through the darkness outside. Detective Ryan, a tall man with sharp features and a calm demeanor, took charge of the situation. He introduced himself and began asking questions. "What time did you last see your son?" Detective Ryan asked, jotting notes in a small notebook. "We left around 6:30, Jacob replied, pacing nervously. "Emily texted us later to say everything was fine. Then we got that call from her at midnight saying Ethan was gone." "Detective," Ryan turned to Laura. "And you haven't spoken to Emily since then?" "No," Laura said, shaking her head. "We tried calling her back, but the line wouldn't connect." The officers split up to search the property while Detective Ryan stayed inside to gather more information. One officer checked the backyard, shining his flashlight into the woods beyond the fence. Another examined the security cameras mounted near the front door. Meanwhile, Jacob and Laura sat together on the couch, holding each other tightly as they waited for news. Every creak of the floorboards or distant sound outside sent their hearts racing. They couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. Hours passed, but there was still no sign of Ethan or Emily. Neighbors began arriving, alerted by the commotion. Mrs. Harper, an elderly woman who lived next door, offered to make coffee for everyone. Others joined the search party, combing the streets and nearby parks with flashlights and worried expressions. As dawn broke, the first glimmer of hope came, not because Ethan had been found, but because Emily had been located. A local jogger, named Susan, spotted her sitting slumped against her car, parked on the outskirts of town near a wooded area. When Susan approached her, Emily seemed dazed and confused, unable to explain what had happened. Word quickly reached the Millers, and Detective Ryan drove to the scene to question her. By the time he arrived, paramedics were already tending to Emily, wrapping her in a blanket to ward off the morning chill. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy, and she spoke in a monotone voice when asked about Ethan. "I don't know where he is," Emily repeated over and over again. "I don't remember leaving the house. I don't know how I got here." Detective Ryan exchanged a concerned glance with one of the officers. Something about Emily's behavior didn't add up. Was she hiding something, or was she truly as clueless as she claimed? Back at the Miller house, Jacob and Laura struggled to process the new development. Emily had been found, but without Ethan. The thought of their son being out there alone, scared and vulnerable, was unbearable. "We need to find him," Laura whispered, clutching Jacob's hand. "We have to bring him home." Detective Ryan returned later that morning, carrying a bag of evidence collected from Emily's car. Mud streaks marred the driver's seat, and traces of dirt led away from the vehicle toward the dense forest nearby. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle, which raised even more questions. "She claims she has no memory of what happened after the power went out," Ryan explained to Jacob and Laura. "But we're going to run some tests to see if there's any physical evidence that might help us piece things together." Jacob nodded numbly, his mind reeling. "Do you think someone took him? Or could Emily have done something?" Ryan hesitated before answering. "Right now, we don't have enough information to rule anything out. But rest assured, we'll do everything we can to find your son." As the day wore on, the investigation intensified. Officers combed the woods near where Emily had been found, searching for clues. They discovered footprints leading deeper into the forest, though it was unclear whether they belonged to Emily, Ethan, or someone else entirely. The media caught wind of the story, and soon reporters swarmed the neighborhood, peppering the Millers with questions they couldn't answer. Laura, retreated to her bedroom overwhelmed by grief and exhaustion. Jacob stayed downstairs, fielding calls from family and friends offering support. Despite the chaos surrounding them, one thing remained clear: Ethan was still missing, and every passing moment made the chances of finding him safe feel slimmer. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon once again, Detective Ryan called Jacob into the kitchen for an update. "We've brought Emily in for further questioning," he said. "She's undergoing psychological evaluation to determine if there's any underlying trauma affecting her memory." Jacob sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "Do you think she knows more than she's letting on?" Ryan chose his words carefully. "It's too early to say. But whatever happened last night, it's clear that Emily is key to understanding what went wrong." Jacob nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. Could Emily really be innocent? Or was she involved? In some way? Either way, the clock was ticking and Ethan's life hung in the balance. The morning light filtered through the trees as Detective Ryan and his team continued their search. The forest near where Emily had been found was dense, with thick underbrush and uneven terrain that made every step challenging. Officers moved carefully, scanning the ground for any sign of Ethan, footprints, clothing, or anything else that might lead them to him. Back at the station, Emily sat in a small, dimly lit room. Her hands were clasped tightly together on the table in front of her, her knuckles white from the pressure. She looked pale and exhausted, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for answers she couldn't find. Across from her, Detective Melanie Harper, a soft-spoken woman with a kind face, tried to get her to talk. "Emily," Melanie said gently, "we need you to tell us everything you remember. Even the smallest detail could help us find Ethan." Emily shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I already told you. I don't remember anything after the power went out. It's all just blank." Melanie leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. "That's okay. Sometimes memories come back when we least expect them. Let's start with what you do remember. What happened before the lights went off?" Emily hesitated, then began recounting the events of the evening. She described playing with Ethan, reading him a bedtime story, and tucking him into bed. She mentioned hearing strange whispers outside and seeing a shadowy figure in the backyard. As she spoke, her voice trembled and she wiped away tears with the back of her hand. "I thought I was imagining things at first," Emily admitted. "But then the power went out, and I heard a loud noise upstairs. I ran to check on Ethan, but he wasn't in his room. That's the last thing I remember clearly." Detective Ryan entered the room holding a file folder. He placed it on the table and opened it, revealing photographs of Emily's car and the muddy footprints found inside. "Do you recognize these?" he asked, pointing to the images. Emily stared at the pictures, her brow furrowing. "No, I mean that's my car, but I don't know how those footprints got there." Ryan nodded, jotting something down in his notebook. "We're running tests on the dirt samples to see if they match anything specific to the area. In the meantime, we're going to try hypnosis therapy. It might help unlock some of your suppressed memories." Emily looked skeptical but didn't argue. She wanted to help, needed to help, but the thought of delving deeper into her fractured recollections terrified her. Later that afternoon, Jacob and Laura arrived at the police station. They had been invited to observe the hypnosis session, though they weren't allowed to participate directly. Sitting in an adjacent room behind a one-way mirror, they watched as a psychologist guided Emily into a trance-like state. "Take a deep breath," the psychologist instructed, his voice soothing. "Now, let yourself go back to last night. Picture the moment the power went out. What do you see?" Emily's breathing slowed, her eyelids fluttering as she focused inward. After a long pause, she began speaking in a dreamy, distant tone. "It's dark. So dark. I hear footsteps. No, not footsteps. Something else. A scraping sound like branches dragging across the floor." Laura gripped Jacob's arm tightly, her nails digging into his skin. He didn't flinch. His gaze was fixed on Emily, hanging onto her every word. "There's someone in the house," Emily continued. A tall figure, its face is hidden, it reaches for me, but I can't move, I'm frozen. And then, there's a bright light. It's everywhere, blinding me. I feel cold, so cold. Her voice trailed off, and for a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the recording equipment. Then suddenly Emily gasped, her body jerking upright. Tears streamed down her face as she snapped out of the trance. "What did I say?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What did I see?" The psychologist reassured her, explaining that her subconscious mind had revealed fragments of memory. To everyone else in the room, her words painted a chilling picture, a shadowy intruder, an unexplainable light, and a sensation of being immobilized. Jacob and Laura exchanged a worried glance. This wasn't just a simple kidnapping, it felt like something far stranger, almost otherworldly. As the day wore on, the investigation shifted gears. Detectives reviewed security footage from the Miller home, hoping to find clues missed during their initial analysis. What they discovered sent chills down their spines. At exactly 1:47 a.m., the cameras had cut out, not due to a power outage. Experts confirmed the feed had been deliberately interrupted. Someone had tampered with the system, ensuring no one would witness what happened next. "This doesn't make sense," Detective Ryan muttered, rubbing his temples. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They planned this carefully. Meanwhile, officers continued searching the woods, following the trail of muddy footprints. The path led them deeper into the forest, where the air grew colder, and the sunlight barely penetrated the canopy above. Eventually, they reached a clearing littered with odd markings carved into tree trunks, symbols that looked ancient and unfamiliar. Detective Melanie examined the markings closely, snapping photos with her phone. "These aren't random scratches," she said. "They're deliberate. Someone or something put them here for a reason." One of the officers pointed toward a cluster of bushes nearby. "Look at this," he said, holding up a small object. It was Ethan's favorite stuffed bear, its fur matted and dirty. Laura let out a sob when she saw it, clutching Jacob's arm as if afraid she might collapse. "They were here," Jacob whispered, his voice hoarse. "Whoever took him brought him here. But why? And where had they gone?" By nightfall, the search party regrouped at the edge of the forest. Exhausted and frustrated, they debated their next move. Jacob insisted on joining the search himself, unwilling to sit idly by while his son remained missing. Laura begged him to stay safe, her eyes red from crying. "We'll find him," Jacob promised, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I won't stop until we bring him home." Detective Ryan approached them, his expression grim. "We've called in additional resources, including K9 units and drones equipped with thermal imaging. If Ethan's still out there, we'll find him." As the group prepared to venture back into the woods, a local man named Kevin offered to help. He was Laura's brother-in-law, a rugged outdoorsman who knew the area well. Armed with flashlights and determination, they set off once again, calling Ethan's name into the darkness. Hours passed without success. Just as hope began to fade, Kevin spotted something unusual, a faint glow emanating from a rocky outcrop ahead. Motioning for the others to follow, he crept closer, his flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. There, nestled between two boulders, was a narrow opening, leading underground. The glow came from within, flickering like fireflies. Jacob's heart raced as he peered inside, half expecting to see Ethan huddled there. Instead, he found only more symbols etched into the stone walls. "This isn't natural," Kevin murmured, shining his light deeper into the tunnel. "Someone built this." Detective Ryan radioed for backup, ordering the team to seal off the area. Whatever this place was, it held answers and possibly dangers they weren't prepared to face alone. Back at the station, Emily sat alone in her cell, staring blankly at the wall. The hypnosis session had left her shaken, fragments of memory swirling in her mind like shards of broken glass. She couldn't shake the image of the tall figure or the blinding light, but most haunting of all was the fleeting glimpse of Ethan's face, wide-eyed and frightened, calling out for help. "I swear I didn't hurt him," Emily whispered to herself, tears streaming down her cheeks. I couldn't. Unbeknownst to her, The truth lay buried somewhere in the depths of the forest, waiting to be uncovered. And as dawn broke over Maplewood, the search for Ethan Miller entered its most perilous phase yet. The sun rose over Maplewood, casting a golden glow across the tops of the trees. But for Jacob and Laura Miller, there was no comfort in the new day. Their son Ethan was still missing, and every passing hour felt like an eternity. The discovery of the underground tunnel had given them a glimmer of hope, but it also raised more questions than answers. Who or what had built it, and why? Detectives Ryan and Melanie arrived at the site early that morning, accompanied by a team of experts equipped with flashlights, ropes, and specialized gear. The entrance to the tunnel was narrow and uneven, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees as they ventured deeper. The air grew colder the farther they went, carrying with it a faint metallic smell that made their skin prickle. Jacob insisted on joining the search, despite Detective Ryan's protests. "This is my son we're talking about," Jacob said, firmly. "I'm not staying behind." Reluctantly, Ryan agreed, assigning Kevin to stay close to Jacob and ensure his safety. Laura remained at the surface, too overwhelmed to descend into the unknown. She sat on a nearby rock, clutching her phone tightly, praying for news. Inside the tunnel, the group moved cautiously, their flashlights revealing strange carvings etched into the walls. The symbols were intricate, almost hypnotic, and unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Some looked like twisting vines, while others resembled eyes or claws. It was as if the tunnel itself was trying to communicate something. But what? "This place gives me the creeps," one of the officers muttered under his breath. His voice echoed slightly, bouncing off the stone walls. "Stay focused," Detective Ryan reminded him. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." After several minutes of crawling, the tunnel opened up into a larger chamber. The space was roughly circular, its ceiling high enough for them to stand upright. In the center of the room stood a crude stone altar, surrounded by remnants of makeshift bedding, blankets, food wrappers, and other signs of recent habitation. Jacob froze, his heart pounding. "Who lives here?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Detective Melanie examined the items carefully, snapping photos with her phone. "It looks like someone's been using this place as a shelter," she said. But who? As they explored further, they found more unsettling details. Drawings covered the walls, sketches of humanoid figures with elongated limbs and oversized heads. Their eyes were large and hollow, staring blankly back at the intruders. One drawing depicted a child being led away by one of these creatures, its tiny hand clasped tightly in the figure's grasp. Jacob's stomach churned as he studied the image. "Is that Ethan?" he asked, pointing to the sketch. Detective Ryan frowned. "It's hard to say, but whoever drew this knows something about what happened." Suddenly, a faint sound broke the silence, a soft giggle, almost childlike, echoing through the chamber. Everyone froze, their flashlights swinging wildly in search of the source. "Ethan," Jacob called out, his voice cracking with desperation. "Are you here?" The laughter came again, louder this time, drifting from somewhere deeper within the tunnel system. Without waiting for the others, Jacob took off in its direction, his footsteps echoing against the stone walls. Kevin followed closely behind, calling out for Jacob to slow down. "Wait," Kevin shouted. "You don't know what's ahead." But Jacob didn't listen. All he could think about was finding his son. He rounded a corner and stumbled into another chamber, smaller than the first. There, lying on the ground, was Ethan's favorite stuffed bear, the same one they'd found earlier in the woods. Jacob fell to his knees, picking it up and holding it close. "He was here," Jacob said, his voice trembling. "He was definitely here." Kevin caught up to him, breathing heavily. "We need to go back and regroup. This isn't safe." Before Jacob could respond, a shadow moved near the edge of the chamber. Both men turned their flashlights toward it, revealing a man crouched low to the ground. He was thin and scruffy, with wild hair and tattered clothing. His eyes darted nervously between Jacob and Kevin as if weighing his options. "Who are you?" Detective Ryan demanded, stepping forward with his flashlight trained on the stranger. The man held up his hands defensively. "My name's Daniel. Harper," he said quickly. "I've been living out here for months. I didn't mean any harm, I swear." Ryan narrowed his eyes. "What do you know about this place? Have you seen a little boy around here?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded, slowly. "Yeah, I saw him. A couple of nights ago. Some people brought him here. They weren't normal, though. They looked wrong." "What do you mean, wrong?" Melanie asked, her tone sharp. "They had weird bodies," Daniel explained, gesturing vaguely with his hands. "Tall, skinny, with big black eyes. They came out of nowhere carrying the kid. I tried to follow them, but they disappeared into the tunnels." Jacob stepped closer, his fists clenched. "Where did they take him? Tell me." "I don't know exactly," Daniel admitted. "But there's another chamber deeper in. That's where they usually go. I haven't dared to follow them all the way. It's dangerous." Detective Ryan exchanged a glance with Melanie. "We need to check it out," he said, "but we'll need reinforcements." "No," Jacob interrupted. "We can't wait. Every second counts. If Ethan's down there, I'm going after him." Kevin placed a firm hand on Jacob's shoulder. "You're not doing this alone. We'll go with you." With Daniel leading the way, the group pressed onward, navigating the labyrinthine tunnels. The air grew colder and the walls seemed to close in around them. Strange noises echoed in the distance, scuttling sounds, whispers, and occasional bursts of static-like interference that made their radios crackle. Finally, they reached the chamber Daniel had described. It was larger than the others, with a domed ceiling and a series of rocky alcoves lining the walls. In the center of the room stood a circle of stones arranged in a spiral pattern, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. And there, curled up in one of the alcoves, was Ethan. Jacob's heart leapt as he rushed to his son's side. "Ethan!" he cried, pulling the boy into his arms. "Oh my God, you're okay." Ethan blinked groggily, looking up at his father with wide, confused eyes. "Daddy?" he murmured, his voice small and weak. "Yes, buddy, it's me," Jacob said, tears streaming down his face. "I've got you now. Everything's going to be fine." Behind them, the group watched in stunned silence. Detective Ryan radioed for backup while Melanie kept her flashlight trained on the glowing stones in the center of the room. Something about them felt unnatural, almost alive. As Jacob prepared to carry Ethan back to safety, the shadows around them began to shift. Figures emerged from the darkness, tall, thin beings with pale skin and enormous, unblinking eyes. They moved silently, surrounding the group without making a sound. Daniel backed away, his face pale with fear. "They're here," he whispered. "We have to leave. Now." Kevin stepped in front of Jacob and Ethan, shielding them with his body. "Get out of here," he shouted at the others. "I'll hold them off." Before anyone could argue, the creatures lunged forward, their movements impossibly fast. Chaos erupted as the group scrambled to escape, their flashlights flickering wildly. Kevin fought valiantly, buying precious seconds for Jacob and the others to retreat. "Go," Kevin yelled, pushing Jacob toward the tunnel. "Take Ethan and run." Jacob hesitated, torn between gratitude and guilt, but ultimately obeyed. Cradling Ethan in his arms, he ran as fast as he could, retracing their steps through the maze-like tunnels. Behind him, he heard muffled shouts and scuffling sounds, but he didn't look back. When they finally emerged into the daylight, Laura was waiting anxiously at the entrance. She gasped when she saw Ethan rushing forward to embrace him. "Oh, my baby," she sobbed, hugging him tightly. "You're safe." Jacob collapsed to his knees, shaking with relief and exhaustion. "We found him," he said, his voice breaking. "We actually found him." But as they celebrated their reunion, none of them noticed the faint glow emanating from the tunnel entrance, or the shadowy figures watching silently from within. Whatever had taken Ethan wasn't done yet, and the secrets hidden beneath the forest were far from uncovered. The sun was setting as Jacob and Laura sat together on the porch of their home. Ethan nestled safely between them. He was wrapped in a blanket, his head resting against his mother's shoulder. Despite the warm embrace, Ethan remained unusually quiet, his wide eyes staring off into the distance as if lost in thought. Laura stroked his hair gently, trying to coax him into talking. "Do you want to tell us what happened, sweetheart?" she asked softly. "It's okay. You're safe now." Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't remember," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "They took me, but I don't know where." Jacob exchanged a worried glance with Laura. The boy's words sent a chill down their spines. Whoever, or whatever, had taken him had left an indelible mark, not just on Ethan but on the entire family. Detective Ryan arrived shortly after, his expression grim. He carried a thick folder filled with notes, photographs, and reports from the investigation. Sitting across from Jacob and Laura on the porch, he began explaining what they had uncovered so far. "We've identified the man who helped you find Ethan," Ryan said. "Daniel Harper. He's been living off the grid for years, mostly keeping to himself. His account of the creatures matches Emily's descriptions under hypnosis." Laura frowned, her grip tightening on Ethan. "You mean those things in the tunnels? Are they real?" Ryan hesitated before answering. "We can't rule it out. The evidence suggests there's something unusual going on here, something beyond conventional explanation." Jacob leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. "What about Kevin? Did anyone find him?" Ryan shook his head. "Search teams are still combing the area, but so far there's no sign of him. We're doing everything we can." The mention of Kevin cast a somber mood over the group. Jacob felt a pang of guilt, knowing that Kevin had sacrificed himself to ensure Ethan's escape. Without his bravery, they might never have made it out alive. Meanwhile, back at the police station, Emily Carter sat alone in an interrogation room. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. She had been questioned repeatedly since the discovery of the underground tunnel, but her answers remained fragmented and inconsistent. Detective Melanie entered the room, carrying a cup of coffee. She placed it on the table in front of Emily and sat down across from her. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. Emily stared at the cup without touching it. "I don't know," she admitted. "I feel like I'm losing my mind. I keep seeing flashes of things. Memories, maybe. But they don't make sense." Melanie nodded sympathetically. "That's normal after trauma. Your brain is trying to process what happened. Do you want to talk about it?" Emily hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I remember being outside the house," she began, her voice trembling. "There was a bright light. And then these figures. They were tall, thin, not human. One of them grabbed my arm. It felt cold, like ice. And then..." Her voice trailed off and she buried her face in her hands. "I think they wanted me to bring Ethan to them," she continued after a moment. "But I don't understand why. What did they want with him?" Melanie scribbled notes in her notebook, her brow furrowing. "Did they say anything to you? Or show you anything specific?" Emily shook her head. "No words, just images, feelings. Like they were inside my head, controlling me." The detective leaned back in her chair, deep in thought. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was unsettling. It seemed clear that Emily had been coerced, manipulated even, into helping abduct Ethan. But by whom, and for what purpose? Later that evening, Detective Ryan returned to the forest with a team of specialists. They set up equipment near the entrance to the tunnels, including motion sensors, thermal cameras, and electromagnetic field detectors. If the creatures, or whatever they were, returned, they intended to be ready. As night fell, the forest grew, eerily quiet. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The investigators worked methodically, scanning the area for anomalies. One of the devices, a portable EMF meter, began emitting a low hum, its needle spiking erratically. "This shouldn't be happening," one of the technicians muttered, adjusting the settings. "There's no source of interference nearby." Ryan approached cautiously, his flashlight sweeping across the trees. "Keep monitoring it," he instructed. If this place is truly connected to what happened, we need to document everything. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly, as if something massive was moving below the surface. The team froze, their flashlights darting nervously around the clearing. A faint glow appeared in the distance, pulsating rhythmically like a heartbeat. "What the hell is that?" one of the officers whispered, gripping his weapon tightly. Ryan held up a hand, signaling for silence. Slowly, they moved toward the light, their footsteps crunching softly on the dry leaves. As they drew closer, the glow revealed itself to be emanating from the mouth of the tunnel, the same tunnel where Jacob and the others had found Ethan. But something was different this time. The symbols carved into the surrounding trees seemed to shimmer, their edges glowing faintly. The air crackled with energy, raising the hairs on the back of Ryan's neck. "Stay sharp," he ordered, his voice steady despite the unease building inside him. "Whatever's down there, we're not leaving until we figure it out." Back at the Miller house, Ethan finally spoke up, breaking the tense silence. "Daddy," he said quietly, tugging on Jacob's sleeve. "I saw Emmy." Jacob blinked in surprise. "Emily, where?" "In the cave," Ethan replied, his voice tinged with fear. "She looked funny, like she wasn't herself." Laura's eyes widened. "What do you mean, funny?" "She was standing next to the big people," Ethan explained, gesturing vaguely with his hands. "They were telling her what to do. She didn't look happy." Jacob and Laura exchanged a troubled glance. This new information raised troubling questions about Emily's involvement or lack thereof in Ethan's abduction. Had she truly been under some kind of control? And if so, how had the creatures managed to manipulate her? The next morning, detectives Ryan and Melanie reconvened with Jacob and Laura to share their findings. The data collected overnight painted a bizarre yet undeniable picture. The forest, and particularly the tunnels, was a hotbed of unexplained activity. Electromagnetic spikes, temperature fluctuations, and strange noises recorded during the night suggested the presence of something unnatural. "We believe Emily may have been influenced by external forces," Melanie explained. "Her memory, loss, the hypnosis results, and Ethan's description all point to some form of mental manipulation." "But what could do that?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. "Are we talking about aliens, ghosts, something else entirely?" Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "At this point, we don't know, but we're working with experts in various fields to analyze the evidence. Whatever it is, it's unlike anything we've encountered before." Jacob clenched his fists, frustration boiling over. "So what happens now? Do we just wait for them to come back?" "No," Ryan said firmly. "We're stepping up our efforts. Surveillance will remain active around the clock, and we're bringing in additional resources to monitor the area. In the meantime, your family should stay somewhere, safe, away from the forest." Laura nodded, though tears welled up in her eyes. "We'll do whatever it takes to protect Ethan." As they discussed their next steps, Ethan sat quietly on the couch, clutching his stuffed bear. His gaze drifted toward the window, where the edge of the forest was visible in the distance. For a brief moment, he thought he saw movement among the trees, a tall, shadowy figure watching silently. He blinked and it was gone. Ethan hugged his bear tighter, unsure whether to tell anyone what he'd seen. Deep down, he knew one thing for certain. The forest wasn't done with them yet. And neither were the creatures hiding within it. The days that followed were tense and uneasy for the Miller family. Jacob and Laura decided to stay with relatives in a nearby town, far from the forest and its mysteries. Ethan seemed quieter than usual, often staring out windows or clutching his stuffed bear tightly. He rarely spoke about what had happened, but when he did, his words hinted at things no child should ever have to experience. Detectives Ryan and Melanie continued their investigation, poring over every scrap of evidence they had gathered. Thermal cameras had captured strange heat signatures deep within the tunnels, shapes that didn't match any known animals or humans. The electromagnetic field detectors had recorded spikes unlike anything caused by natural phenomena. And then there were the symbols etched into the trees, which experts identified as resembling ancient markings found in other parts of the world, but never fully understood. Despite all this, one question loomed larger than the rest. Why had Ethan been taken? What purpose could a 2-year-old boy serve to creatures, or beings, so alien? Emily Carter remained under constant supervision, both for her safety and to monitor her mental state. Her fragmented memories still surfaced unpredictably, sometimes triggered by flashes of light or sudden noises. During one session with Detective Melanie, Emily described being led through the tunnels by the tall, thin figures. She recalled feeling detached as if she were watching herself from outside her body. "They told me I had to bring him," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They said it was important, but I don't know why." Melanie jotted down notes, her expression thoughtful. "Do you remember anything else, any details about where they took you?" Emily shook her head. "It's blurry, like a dream. All I know is that we went deeper underground. There were more lights, more symbols, and then silence. Meanwhile, back in Maplewood, rumors spread quickly among the townspeople. Some claimed the forest was cursed, while others speculated about secret government experiments or extraterrestrial activity. The media picked up on the story, turning it into a national sensation. Reporters swarmed the area, desperate for interviews and answers. Detective Ryan worked tirelessly to keep the focus on finding Kevin Harper, who was still missing. One evening, Daniel Harper, the drifter who had helped Jacob find Ethan, was brought in for further questioning. Though initially reluctant, Daniel eventually opened up about his own encounters with the mysterious beings. He described seeing them emerge from the ground like shadows given form, their movements fluid and unnatural. They communicated not with words but with images projected directly into his mind. "They're not from here," Daniel said, his voice trembling. "I don't think they're even alive, not in the way we understand life." Detective Ryan leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "They're echoes," Daniel replied cryptically. "Remnants of something older, something vast, though vague." Daniel's account aligned eerily with the descriptions provided by Emily and Ethan. It seemed clear that whatever these beings were, they operated on a level beyond human comprehension. Determined to uncover the truth, Jacob returned to the forest one last time. Accompanied by Detective Ryan and a small team of researchers, he ventured into the tunnels once again. This time they came prepared with advanced equipment, drones equipped with infrared sensors, portable seismic scanners, and even a device designed to detect gravitational anomalies. As they descended deeper into the earth, the air grew colder, heavier. The walls of the tunnel pulsed faintly with an inner light, as if alive. Strange whispers echoed around them, indistinct yet insistent, urging them onward, or perhaps warning them away. At the heart of the labyrinth, they discovered a massive chamber, unlike anything they'd seen before. Its ceiling stretched impossibly high, disappearing into darkness. In the center stood a massive stone structure shaped like a spiral staircase leading upward toward nothingness. Surrounding it were dozens of alcoves, each containing crude drawings and carvings depicting scenes of abduction and transformation. Jacob froze as he recognized one of the images. Ethan, held aloft by the tall, thin figures, his tiny hands reaching out toward something unseen. Nearby was another drawing, this one of Emily, her eyes wide with terror as the same beings guided her forward. "This isn't just a hideout," Detective Ryan murmured, his voice barely audible. "It's a gateway." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Dust rained down from above, and the spiral structure began to glow brighter, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. The whispers grew louder, forming a cacophony of sound that made their ears ring. "We need to leave. Now," Ryan shouted, grabbing Jacob's arm. But Jacob hesitated, drawn inexplicably to the glowing structure. As he stared at it, fragments of memory surged through his mind. Images of Ethan crying out for help, of Emily walking blankly into the unknown, of Kevin fighting desperately against impossible odds. For a fleeting moment, he felt connected to everything that had happened, as if the truth lay just beyond his grasp. Then, with a deafening roar, the structure erupted in a blinding flash of light. The team stumbled backward, shielding their eyes as the chamber filled with a searing brilliance. When the light faded, the structure was gone, leaving only smooth rock behind. Back at the surface, the group emerged shaken but unharmed. Jacob collapsed onto the grass, gasping for breath. "What was that?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Ryan shook his head, equally bewildered. "I don't know. But whatever it was, it's over. For now." Over the following weeks, life in Maplewood slowly returned to normal. The forest became quiet once again, devoid of strange lights or unsettling whispers. Kevin Harper was never found, though his sacrifice was remembered fondly by those who knew him. Emily regained some semblance of normalcy, though she vowed never to return to babysitting. Instead, she dedicated herself to helping the Millers piece together the events of that fateful night. Together they shared their stories, hoping to make sense of the incomprehensible. As for Ethan, he began to heal, though traces of the trauma lingered. He would occasionally wake up screaming, claiming he saw the big people standing at the foot of his bed. Each time, Jacob and Laura reassured him that he was safe, that the creatures were gone. But deep down, none of them truly believed that. The forest still held secrets, waiting silently beneath its canopy. And somewhere, in the dark recesses of the earth, the spiral structure pulsed faintly, ready to awaken once more.